Welcome to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. Signs and displays at national parks that discuss issues like broken treaties, military atrocities, and loss of language and culture because of boarding schools are starting to come down. It's the result of President Donald Trump's executive order to, in his words, restore truth and sanity to American history. It's also part of a larger effort to scrub public information that paints the government in an unfavorable light. We'll hear more about what is being removed from view right after the news.
This is National Native News. I'm Antonia Gonzalez. Ojibwe tribes in the Great Lakes region are raising concerns about Trump administration plans to remove a rule that limits road building in national forest land. Chuck Kornbach has more.
The roadless rule is a U.S. Forest Service policy that for 25 years has curtailed building or reconstructing roads in the national forests. There have also been limits on commercial timber harvesting in roadless areas that have been inventoried. Last summer, the U.S. Agriculture Department, which includes the Forest Service, proposed rescinding the roadless rule. The department said that would give more decision-making authority to regional forest managers and improve access for fighting fires. But the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, which serves 11 Ojibwe tribes in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Michigan that have treaty-protected hunting, fishing, and gathering rights, backs the roadless rule. Commission spokesperson Jenny Van Sickle says agency scientists looked at how the rule has protected 5 national forests in what's called the ceded territory. She says the federal government has a responsibility to enforce treaty rights there.
That's wild rice. That's tapping maples for sap to make, sugar. These are real activities. They're not theoretical. These are federal responsibilities that remain in place. So to try to kick that to regional foresters doesn't make a lot of sense.
Van Sickle says there are already many roads in the national forests. She says if the roadless rule needs amending, the tribes are willing to talk.
If the rule needs work, we want to be at those tables. We want to talk about those problems. We want to get to those solutions, and we can do that together. We've worked very closely and formally with the Forest Service for nearly 30 years.
An Agriculture Department spokesperson says the agency remains committed to a consultation process with the tribes. Also, that if the roadless rule ends, land use decisions would still need to comply with specific forest or grassland management plans and other applicable laws, all developed with public involvement. For National Native News, I'm Chuck Kornbach.
Tribal leaders respond to Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt's final State of the State address, which he delivered Monday. Tribal leaders say Stitt misrepresents tribes. Tribes and the governor have had a rocky relationship, including disagreements over jurisdiction, gaming, and other issues. In his speech, Stitt said all laws should apply equally to all Oklahomans. Stitt said, quote, "Many of us in this room have decried the DEI programs of the Biden administration, yet stand by quietly when someone says an Indian should be subject to a different set of laws." Choctaw Nation Chief Gary Batten in a statement said tribes and tribal members have sovereign rights, which are not based on race, but treaties and other agreements between tribal nations and the U.S. Cherokee Nation Principal Chief Chuck Hoskin Jr. said in a statement that the governor effectively called for the termination of tribal government, calling it rhetoric cloaked in references to DEI and race. Hoskin said, fortunately, Stitt spoke to a bipartisan chamber. Both leaders say they look forward to working with the legislature and other elected officials. A number of tribal leaders attended the address. The Interior Department has added the Lumbee Tribe of North Carolina to the official list of federally recognized tribes, formalizing the tribe's government-to-government relationship with the U.S. The agency published the updated list in the Federal Register following President Donald Trump's signing of legislation in December, granting federal recognition status to the Lumbee Tribe. The list consists of 575 American Indian and Alaska Native tribal entities. I'm Antonia Gonzalez.
National Native News is produced by Koahnic Broadcast Corporation with funding by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Skugtash. For more than 40 years, Ramona Farms has revived ancient traditional foods, tepary beans, pinoli, polentas, and more, all from store.ramonafarms.com. Ramona Farms supports this show. Tomye.
Hear that? Tribal college faculty do so much, one can't say it all here. Nothing but respect. Visit mostthoroughdescription.com. The American Indian College Fund supports this program.
Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.
This is Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. Officials at Death Valley National Park are reviewing a sign that portrays tribes that inhabited the area in a positive light. The sign was developed in partnership with the Timbisha Shoshone tribe that just marked the 25th anniversary of landmark legislation that established a land base and co-stewardship of the park. The review is part of a larger effort at a number of national parks around the country to scrub signs that present images the Trump administration deems disparaging to American interests. Other places where signs are slated for removal include the Little Bighorn Battlefield, the Grand Canyon, and the Grand Tetons in Wyoming. Today we'll get an idea of what is on those signs and what it took to place them there in the first place. We also want to hear from you today, our listeners. Give us a call. The number is 1-800-996-2848. That's also 1-800-99-NATIVE. Joining us now from Camp Verde, Arizona is Dorothy Firecloud. She is the retired Assistant Director of Native American Affairs for the National Park Service. She's also a citizen of the Rosebud Sioux Tribe. Dorothy, good morning and welcome back to Native America Calling.
Good morning. How are you today?
Doing well, thank you. Joining us from Espanola, New Mexico, we have Otis Half Moon. He is a retired, longtime National Park Service employee, and he is Nez Perce. Otis, hello, and welcome to you as well.
Good morning to you.
Thank you. And in Browning, Montana, we're joined by Jerry Hall, co-director of the Tribal Historic Preservation Office for the Blackfeet Tribe, and she is Blackfeet. Jerry, good morning. Pleasure to have you on the show as well.
Good morning, everyone. I hope your day's going fine.
Thank you, Jerry. And Dorothy, I'm going to go ahead and begin with you today. Your career with the National Park Service. You worked for nearly 2 decades, fostering better relationships between tribes and the agency. What goes into building those types of relationships?
Oh, gosh, a lot of hard work. And that's one of the things, that we're really concerned about with what's happening currently with the signage, with Executive Order 3431, is that the requirement to do consultation with tribes is not happening. And the parks are doing their best to ensure that consultation is being done in accordance with the law. However, higher-ups outside of the Park Service are really pushing the parks not to do that.
Now, you just recently retired in December of last year. Up until recently, what kind of progress had the Park Service made in terms of improving tribal consultation and removing derogatory names from park sites?
Mm-hmm. Well, let's see. I first began working with the federal government in 1992 with the Bureau of Indian Affairs doing water rights, and then from there I went to the Forest Service as a water right or as a Native American Affairs liaison for the Southwest region. And so began working with tribes in that capacity, way back when, in 1996, I think it was. Anyway, so since that time up to now, there's been vast changes that have been really positive about working with tribal nations and tribal governments. Excuse me. And to see all of that hard work over the last several decades just come to a complete halt is really discouraging. And I know for the tribes, especially because we've had so many wonderful opportunities of being able to include signage that told the full story, and it's something that the visitors have really enjoyed. They enjoy hearing all sides of the stories. They enjoy hearing the tribal perspective of their ancestral homelands. And another thing that really happened out of this was the fact that tribal people began to feel welcome back into their ancestral homelands that had become national parks. And when I went into the Washington office was right about the same time that Director Sams came in. And one of our first priorities was to actually develop a tribal consultation policy for the National Park Service. The National Park Service was the last agency to actually have its own separate tribal consultation policy. What we had done in the past was to rely on the overall umbrella of the Department of Interior consultation policy, which wasn't that effective when it came to working with the parks and the tribes. And so Director Sams, when he came in, he goes, we need to get it done. He had actually spoken to one of the Secretaries of Interior way back when, like several decades ago, about the need for the Park Service to develop that policy. And so when he came in and to do that, he said that he didn't realize that after a couple of decades that he would actually be the director to get it done. But we were able to get the policy written and get it signed by Director Sams.
All right. Dorothy, what's an example of a sign or a site that reflects Native American history that you worked on and could now be affected by this order?
Well, when I was working up at Devil's Tower, well, first, before I went to Devil's Tower, I was acting as the deputy forest supervisor on the Black Hills National Forest and began working with Wind Cave at that time to do consultations. And as a result of that, after 8 years of consulting and meeting with tribes, Wind Cave was actually able to develop a sign that's at the blowhole of the cave itself that talks about the history and why it's so significant to the tribes up in that area. And like I said, it took 8 years of consultation, 8 years of meeting with the tribes and getting together and having all of the tribes agree on the language for the one sign that would be placed there. And it's like a destination area within the park for our visitors when they go to learn about the meaning behind all of this for tribal people.
Dorothy, you mentioned earlier that park visitors really appreciated the signage and the information that related to Native history and Native perspectives. What have you heard now from the general public or anyone visiting the parks with regard to these historical markers possibly coming down?
They're really disappointed, because the one thing with our visitors is that they go to learn about the place. They go to learn the history. And the more that you can provide to them of the entire context of that place, the more enjoyable it is for them. And we have been able to get a lot of the tribal vendors into the parks. And then when the vendors are there, then the visitors are able to visit with them directly and get even more of that one-on-one story from the local tribal people. And it really does make it a more enjoyable experience.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Dorothy. Otis Half Moon, I want to bring you into the conversation now. What are the consequences, in your view, of historical information that documents Native perspectives now being removed from national parks and other landmarks?
Well, first of all, a little bit of my past is that I again retired Park Service for a number of years, but before that I worked for my tribe. I was a cultural contact for the Nez Perce tribe, so I dealt with all the federal entities that surrounded my reservation, BLM, National Forest Service, National Park Service, and so forth. So I got to deal with some of the things that the tribes, the pressures that they were put under, as far as what the feds wanted from them. And they always wanted it the 11th hour. When you do by documents, by 3, 4 big documents that say, we want to know next week, as if we had no other time but to read their stuff that they give to us. So I worked that side. And working in the National Park Service, it took some time and also, which Dorothy mentioned, for trust for the people, for the tribal people to have with the NPS. It took some time. And some of the interpretations, and again, I know we talk about signage. What concerns me a lot with this executive order, and it's only the beginning, is the interpretation of the stories. Give you an example. At the Big Hole National Battlefield in Montana, make a long story short, over 100 Nez were killed. It was murder that took place there by the soldiers. And not only at the Big Hole, we have Sand Creek, we have Washita, we have other places as well too. In the story that that this administration wants to portray is that I'm not sure how they're going to make themselves sound good, but it's going to happen. At one time, when I first worked at Big Hole National Battlefield, it was in particular this all-soldier point of view. And the idea came in for a balanced interpretation, and it took some superintendents to have some guts to make some changes as well as before it came down out of Washington, D.C. Excuse me. But they kind of started some idea of tribal consultation within the Park Service way back when, but again, it eventually evolved. But it took some time, and the stories themselves, it took a long while for my tribe to deal with the changes that were happening at Big Hole National Battlefield and Bear Paw and Whitebird. But that's what we're worried about. I mean, everything's being whitewashed. Everything's being changed for this DEI thing that's happening across this country. And again, which can impact the visitors and how they view us and also how they view the Park Service. Once it's all done, it's going to take a long time to correct, a long time. That's something that really bothers me.
Yeah, I think a lot of our listeners right now would agree with you, Otis, and have a lot of concerns. We're going to take our first break, and we'll come back. We'll continue this conversation with our guests, and we do have the phone lines open for listeners who would like to join us right now. Just call 1-800-996-2848. What are your thoughts with regard to signage and other pieces of information that are displayed at national parks that share the Native perspective? It sounds like it took a long time to get those perspectives in place, documented at these parks, and now they could be coming down. How do you feel about that? Does it upset you? Does it anger you? Do you want to talk about it? Give us a call, 1-800-996-2848. That number again, 1-800-996-2848. Native American Studies programs in higher education provide a path for research, inclusion, and comprehensive scholarship from a Native perspective. But the environment for those programs has changed significantly. On the eve of the American Indian Studies Conference, we'll ask about the future of academic inclusion on the next Native America Calling.
Every family caregiver could use help finding the necessary resources to care for their loved one. The AARP Family Caregiver Resource Guide helps family caregivers access key programs, services, and agencies in their communities. A copy of the guide is available by calling 877-333-5885 or online at aarp.org/caregiverresources. AARP supports this show.
For joining us today on Native America Calling. We're hearing about the National Park Service removing signs with information about Native history. And we'd like to hear from you as well. You can call us at 1-800-996-2848. That number is also 1-800-99-NATIVE. We're speaking now with Otis Halfmoon. He is a retired, longtime National Park Service employee. He is Nez Perce. And Otis, you and our other guest, Dorothy Firecloud, both of you, had high-ranking positions during your time at the National Park Service. And it really makes me wonder now, this latest executive order, do you think it could in any way discourage Native people from joining the National Park Service now?
Who do you want first?
Go ahead, Otis.
Okay, I definitely think it will impact any future employment. when Dorothy and I were working together with an NPS, and we was trying to idea of hiring more tribal people, but there's no special hiring authority to hire from the tribal people, but yet we was pushing buttons and trying to get people to consider the National Park Service as a career. It is a good career, but with the changes that are taking place, all the tribes are watching, the younger ones are watching. It's going to take a long while for it to be resolved. I know one thing that we talked about within the NPS, and which I've seen something that we tried to push at one time, is that we can tell our own story. You know, we don't need no ethnographer, archaeologist, or anybody of that nature. That we can have our own tribal people tell these stories, and also to their respective tribes telling their stories. I know one time they tried to get me of the Glacier National Park to work up there, and as far as telling some of the Blackfeet story on East Glacier. And I kept telling you got to work with the Blackfeet tribe. I'm a Nez Perce. And at that time, they was trying to put a Salish Kootenai interpretive sign in Blackfeet country, and I was telling them you don't do that. They got me out of there. They moved me back down to New Mexico again, and that was fine because I did not agree some of the stuff that the Park Service is trying to do for us or do to us. And so it has happened throughout, different areas. I know hiring authorities, Dorothy and I have pros and cons and stories that we can tell on and on about that.
Well, Otis, as you mentioned, there are just certain things that only a native person, another native person would really know and understand, like you just described. Dorothy, what's your advice right now for a young native person who might be considering a career in the National Park Service based on everything that's happening right now? What would you tell them?
I would tell them to wait a couple of years, and in the meantime, further their education, because the greater that your education level is, the higher that you can come into the National Park Service. And I really was discouraged, this past year, because we had worked really hard, like Otis said, for many years to get more Native people to become park rangers and to work within the Park Service and tell their own stories. And unfortunately, this past year, with all of the pushing out of federal employees, like my office, we had, when Director Sams came in, he was able to get funding for my office, because when I got there, I was the only one. And he was able to get a couple of million in funding for people. So we had a full-time staff of 6 when the current administration came in. And within 3 months, we were down to 1 person. And unfortunately, the only person left is Alicia Deegan, and she's acting in my old position now, but she's there pretty much by herself. And we have one intern, Drew, who's a Navajo. And so hopefully, we can get those numbers to start coming back again. And then in our regional office, we had finally gotten to a point where we had a regional tribal liaison who was Native American, except for one region. And unfortunately, over half of those people have left now as well. So the numbers of really good qualified Native people that we had that were able to work their way up through the system is pretty much been obliterated.
All right, Dorothy, thank you. Let's go to the phones. We have Jen, who is listening online in East Texas. Hello, Jen. You're on the air.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean, for taking my call. Of course, there's been so many things happen lately with the DEI problem, and it's really getting to be too much. It's just infuriating. Because you asked me how we felt about this at National Parks removing history or historic information, and this is an act clearly of erasure. And not only that, it's disallowing free speech. And I've worked with the Texas State Park, and I've visited many national parks. And once at Mesa Verde, the ranger was a Navajo gentleman, and he talked about how the ancestors lived in this area and hunted, and the spiritual part of the hunt. And it just meant so much more So what do we do? I think we should start a letter writing campaign or something, Thank you.
Thank you, Jen, for calling in today. That was Jen listening online in East Texas. For anyone else who would like to join us, that number, 1-800-99-NATIVE. Give us a call. We've got producers standing by waiting for you. Let's get a tribal perspective now. And to do that, I want to introduce another guest on our show. This is Mandy Campbell, who joins us on the road in California. She is the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Timbisha Shoshone Tribe. And she is, of course, a Timbisha Shoshone tribal member. Mandy, good morning and welcome to our show.
Hi. How are y'all?
We're doing great. Now, your tribe, you just celebrated the 25th anniversary of the Timbisha Shoshone Homeland Act, which returned land in Death Valley to your people. This requires the tribe to work with the Park Service on land use and preservation of the Death Valley Monument. How would you describe the tribe's current relationship now with the Park Service?
We have a very unique situation. We actually have our homeland in the middle of the Park Service of Death Valley National Park, which we call it Timbisha. And we also have a shared management agreement that was signed with Clinton in 2000. We actually have a great relationship with Park Service now. When we celebrated this 25th, started to work with Park Service to celebrate the 25th anniversary of our Homeland Act, the Friday before our celebration on the 31st, we've got a letter stating that we could not use the words homeland or we are still here, which I don't think that the department, DOE or DOI or whatever up there in Washington realized that we had this agreement, we have this homeland, the shared management agreement with them, this co-management. So technically, I'm not positive if they can really tell us that we can't use this wording or remove this wording. We're still in, we haven't taken it down yet. There's still talk about it, but yeah, it's.
So the words homeland and then the phrase "we are still here." Those were the issues that they had concerns with.
To remove.
Yeah.
Yes.
How did they reach out to you? I mean, I'm just curious. Was it a letter? Was it a phone call? How did you find out that, hey, you know what? We want you to take that information down. We want you to remove it. What was the context to that communication?
With Park Service to. We have a display case inside of the visitor center there, and we wanted to add to the display case. So me and my committee there in Death Valley actually worked up some verbal, some language that we wanted to display, and anything that is put into the visitor center has to go up to Washington. And when we gave it to Park Service and showed what we needed, Mike Reynolds and them had to send it up, and when it got returned, they showed the language that had to be removed, including some language that's already in the display that has been there for 15 years.
What is that language?
They wanted the "we are still here" and the homeland. This is our homeland.
Okay, I understand. Well, Mandy, it sounds like you folks are possibly not going to comply. Then what's your strategy here going forward?
We ended up having 25 years ago, we did a march fighting for our homelands. So in the celebration, we also added a 25-year celebratory march showing the world and invited all the media, got it on social media, all the news, whatever we could to get people to come. We did a celebratory march once again to let everybody know we are still here and we are not going nowhere. These are our homelands. And we also had, Park Service was invited. We invited all the organizations that work with us. And we want to show everybody, even them up there, that we do work good with everybody. And there's no reason for all this. We are a great ally to all the communities and all the organizations. We can work together. What is the reasoning for all this? It don't make sense. We are people too.
Mandy, what do you think the message is? What do you think this is saying to the public when federal government says words like homeland, a phrase like we are still here? That has to go. What do you think that says?
I don't understand why we can't tell our story. Why can't we say what we have to say too? Mm-hmm. Everybody else does. How are we any different?
How many years, how much time, how much effort, how many resources have gone into just creating the information and documenting the information the way you have, and now with it potentially having to go away? I'm just curious in terms of just what the investment was for your people.
My auntie and them it's been beyond time, but my Auntie Pauline and my Aunt Grace and my mother, when I was a child, for them to start making money, my mother was like, let's sell tacos when they stuck them down there in the 1930s and barbed wire fenced our family in. I was a kid in the 70s and they opened up a taco stand just to make money, and Park Service came down, and that's where they put us. Park Service came down there and ate our tacos and bought our tacos. And that's how we made the money to actually fight for our homeland and fight to be recognized.
The irony there.
And then in 2000, we got our homelands.
Right.
Park Service, everybody came down and ate our Indian tacos. That's how they started to make money. And now here, you're telling us to remove it. I remember as a kid, our roads said no access. And now we finally have Tombisha Shoshone on it. How in the world are we not people too?
Yeah. Wow. Mandy, really appreciate you coming on the show. Again, I just can't get over the irony of that, selling tacos to the National Park Service, and now you're dealing with this. Let's go back to the phones. We have Clark, who is listening in Hopi, Arizona. Good morning, Clark. Good to have you calling in today.
Morning again, Sean. It is, again, one of those times historically, again, we're going back 200 years or more. But, I am a proud member of our people, and that being one of the ambassadors to go a step forward to correct the history of a lot of our place names of these areas. You talk about Mesa Verde, Chaco, Grand Canyon, Escalante Staircase, Bears Ears, and so forth. And, we work real diligently, real hard on these areas to make the correction to how the non-natives, when they came about, like Powell and all them guys, how they identified these places. But yet, we were there probably since the dinosaurs were here. And today, I really don't know what the real reason is behind it, that this administration is really working furiously to erase the history of who are the first peoples here on this land. And so many people before me already made those kind of history corrections and documentations. But again, we're still working to make those corrections. But yet now it feels like, all right, to me it appears to be that the only race that should be here in America is the Anglo society. And unfortunately, we're again put to the back of the bus and told to sit back there and start, maybe it's going to come to the point again where most of us natives and other minorities are going to be told to go use which bathroom is correct for us. But yet, that's the way I see America going today, and it hurts, angers a lot of people, frustrates a lot of people, because there's a lot of work that has been invested by many, many people to make the correction on history how it became what it is today.
Mm-hmm. Clark, you really think we're going in that direction? Today, it's removing information on monuments, and tomorrow back to full-scale pre-Civil Rights Act segregation?
That's the way I feel right now, because working with the Arizona Trails, we're still correcting it, like in northern Arizona, some of the cultural sites and spots what Hopi identifies with or the connections with. Working on that, and then it's just really a big disappointment for me when you're trying to make things right, make other people understand what is correct. And there's a lot of people that support our endeavors of what we do, but it's just a few, the handful that's either in Washington, D.C. or in spots throughout America that feel that erasing other people's history is the right way.
All right, that is Clark joining the conversation from Hopi, Arizona. And that number again, 1-800-996-2848 for anyone else who would like to join the conversation. We're going to take another short underwriting break. We'll come back and we'll speak with Jerry Hall, who is in Browning, Montana, co-director of the Tribal Historic Preservation Office for the Blackfeet Tribe. Stay with us, listeners. We will be right back.
Tribal Development Partners, helping tribes build toward their goals through 105L leasing and essential facility development, empowering sovereignty, strengthening community. More at tribaldevpartners.com, proud supporters of this show.
Kaufman & Associates has over 35 years of experience serving Indian country, supporting growth, transformation, and sustainability of tribal programs. More at kaufmaninc.com, KAUFFMANINC.com.
We're glad you're with us today on Native America Calling. Do signs at national parks with historical information about Native Americans make a difference in how the public perceives history? The Trump administration thinks so and is ordering signs at several sites removed. We're hearing about what is on those signs and how they came about today. You can join us. Call 1-800-996-2848. That is also 1-800-99-NATIVE. We've already had a couple of great calls. You could be the next one. Again, 1-800-996-2848. Jerry Hall joins us now from Browning, Montana. She is the co-director of the Tribal Historic Preservation Office for the Blackfeet Tribe. And Jerry, you're going to meet with the National Park Service regarding what markers or signs are slated for removal. What are you hoping to convey to those officials?
We're actually meeting today. Part of my office is actually in an actual meeting with the National Park Service representative. And for the most part, what we're gathering from the Glacier Park perspective, that a lot of the climate change signs will be changed on certain signs around the park. We're looking at not a whole lot of Native history being erased at this point. However, this is sort of just what they've gotten from their orders coming down the line, is that majority of the signage will be due to climate change, which, also has a impact on modern times. When you look at the idea of erasing climate change and how our carbon footprint affects the mountains and the ecosystem and everything in that nature, it really draws into what the Native perspective is onto our plants, our animal life, our connection to the areas, and so hopefully we're looking at a minimal effect on the actual Blackfoot history in Glacier National Park.
Okay. So, Jerry, you mentioned climate change is what they're most concerned about right now. Can you give us an example of what kind of information related to climate change is on some of this signage that they now want removed? What does it say exactly?
We haven't gotten a exact signage on what they want to have changed so far. I know a lot of things that we're looking at is, we're conducting a lot of high altitude cultural site surveys in the area where there is the chance of some of these archaeological sites being uncovered with the melting of the glaciers. The melting of the glaciers is probably something that they're going to be looking at. I know, the global warming effect is something that the current administration really highly likes to say isn't true. So I'm speculating that part of the global warming will be part of some of these signs erasures when they're talking about the climate change.
Okay. Now, Jerry, just this past week, the Blackfeet Nation remembered the 156th year anniversary of the Baker Massacre. This is one of the deadliest massacres in Montana history. Are you concerned, today it's climate change, but are you concerned at some point that markers and signs could potentially be taken down?
Oh, certainly. I mean, when you look at these signs, they replicate a living homeland, a living history, everything that we have on our culture and our involvement into the area is put on these maps, and so a lot of them are seen as, just a basic park map, and a lot of the maps that are out there, they're not just decorations, they're intact knowledge systems that often talk about the history, directions, hazards, seasonal movement, responsibilities of the Blackfeet. And so when we take into consideration the Baker Massacre sign, it was such a tragic event for our Blackfeet Nation that it literally took 2 generations passing, roughly about 108 years before the second generation felt comfortable in telling their story. And so we're just hearing a lot of these older generations whose grandmothers told them the story about Baker Massacre, and they're actually just getting their voice out now, because of the effects that the warlike nature that happened during the Baker Massacre scarred some of these people to where they wouldn't talk about anything for the fear of the military coming back and doing a reenactment of that force of nature, or just taking it out on the Blackfeet years later. So when we look at the Baker Massacre, we look at certain events that led up to the Baker Massacre that also altered in when our ceded strip was given to Glacier National Park. Of course, Glacier Park resides in Blackfeet ancestral territory, and so there's a lot of discrepancies about how the park actually gained that land from the Blackfeet. A lot of the elders of the story talk about a 99-year lease. And so, when we get into the idea of these signs, just having our Blackfeet information out there is detrimental to our society. There's nothing about us can go without us, basically. And so when we talk about our naming systems of the signs and the history of the Blackfeet in itself, we look at some of the signs that are out there now. They're sort of in a whitewashed type of environment. They don't really have a lot of true, accurate history to some of these signs. And so, it's going back to the original talking point. I think any erasure of any of these historical signs would be detrimental to Indian country.
Jerry, do you have any idea of about how many people annually read these signs? Like, for instance, the information on the Baker Massacre. How many people actually read that, take that information home with them?
That I'm not 100% sure. However, I do know the numbers from people traveling into Glacier National Park, their numbers gather, they rise every year. I think last year there was somewhere around 3 million visitors into the park, just basically kind of counting at they had a reservation system that you had to secure spots there. However, the actual sign about the Baker Massacre does not reside in Glacier National Park. There's a place down closer to the actual marker of where the massacre taken place. And so that specific sign of the Baker Massacre, I'm not 100% sure of how many people actually read that sign.
What was the history with that Baker Massacre sign? Do you know what all it took to get that set up?
Like I said, there probably was a ton of people that had to be involved in it initially and get their actual story out. With the Native people kind of withholding that information out of fear, I think it had taken a long time for the actual story to come out. However, the Blackfeet did have counts of events that led up into the Baker Massacre, and so they're starting to talk about that. A lot of our Native history, we have the oral storytelling. We'd never really written down a lot of our stories, and so a lot of these stories were passed generation to generation, grandma to granddaughter, and just basically getting out that information. So when you think about that as a whole, I'm sure it took a lot of work and effort to get these signs placed and just to be able to have them in their distinct areas.
Mm-hmm. Jerry, signs related to Native history are also coming down in the Grand Canyon and also Little Bighorn Battlefield National Monument, which is in southeastern Montana, a few hours from where you are. But do you have any knowledge or any insights as to why those signs are coming down?
I don't. I don't really have an idea on why those signs are coming down. I would speculate that the current administration is singling out certain historical places that he wants to probably whitewash first. But and when we think about the idea of these signs being taken down, I've seen several people say we're not in control of our history anymore, which I have to take a stance against that, because we are in control of our history. We still have the right to get the word out, and each one of our tribes here have our respective reservations that we can combat and put up our own signage on the reservation. There's the east entrance to Glacier National Park. You have to drive through the Blackfeet Reservation, and so there's thoughts of us putting up our own signs talking about if there's anything erased from the park, that we can put up our own signs in that area.
Thank you, Jerry. Let's go back to the phones. This is Cassie, who is listening on Interlochen Radio in northern Michigan. Hi, Cassie. Great to have you calling in. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. What's on your mind?
I was just wondering, I believe that the national parks are just one of this country's greatest treasures. And I think it's critical to include all of the history of all of the cultures of this country. This administration claims to be railing against waste, fraud, and abuse. And I'm wondering if anyone knows what the cost to the taxpayers are to have the accurate history erased and inaccurate history be the only information available to us.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Just the cost, the hours that go into taking a sign down, putting a new one up, building a new sign, all of that. I'm not sure if anybody on the show right now has that type of information available, but I would like Dorothy Firecloud to comment, because our caller Cassie refers to national parks as our greatest treasure. And Dorothy, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. Would you agree, our greatest treasure? And if so, throughout your career working in the Park Service, what kind of feedback did you get from just average Americans who would visit the parks every year?
Well, the National Park Service is known as America's storyteller. So based on that, we're the ones that are responsible for telling all of the stories of everything, to include all of that history. And I remember, coming into the Park Service in 2006 from the Forest Service, one of the signs that was pretty much at the vast majority of parks was you would come in and there would be a little sign off to the side and it would say, "We are still here." And that was how we got a lot of the interpretation started within the National Park Service. And we are still here, and we're not going to go away. We're a part of this land. It's our ancestral homelands. And so those stories need to be told. And like I said, it's what the visitor is expecting and wanting more so. And we've started telling a lot of like night sky stories, and including like our theme went, half of the park is after dark. And so we're starting to include a lot of that, a lot of the origin stories. And I know at Grand Canyon, one of the signs that they're wanting to take down has to deal with the fact that the Havasupai people were removed from the canyon in order to establish the park. That happened at Glacier, where people were removed, at Yosemite, where the tribal people were removed, and it's part of the history of that place and the establishment of the parks. So all of those stories need to be told in full in order for the visitor to be able to have that complete story of place.
Dorothy, do you have any insights with regard to Little Bighorn Battlefield National Monument?
No, I've reached up, but I haven't heard back exactly what signs are going to be taken down there. But I'm sure it's having to deal with the tribal side of the story. And there's one section of the park that has a really beautiful area that's dedicated to the Native American soldiers. And so, yeah.
There's also that big museum there. I'm curious as to how that could be impacted as well.
Mm-hmm. They're building a new visitor center, so the old visitor center, is being removed right now, and the new one is being built. But I'm sure it may impact a lot of the signage that will be going into the new visitor center that the park and the tribes have been working on for at least, 3 to 4 years now. They've been working on developing the signage to go into the new visitor center, and I don't know how that will be impacted.
Well, Dorothy, as we mentioned earlier, you did retire just this past December, but it sounds like you're going to stay active and involved in some of these issues maybe going forward?
I hope to, yeah. So I still get, a lot of calls from park employees asking, what my recommendations, and stuff, because, everything came to such a halt so quickly that we didn't really have time to, to visit about how things could move forward. And especially with losing, I would say, over 50% of the Native American park ranger population, it's really going to have a negative impact.
All right. And with that, we're out of time. So we're going to have to go ahead and wrap up our show for today. But first, I want to thank all of our guests, Dorothy Firecloud, Otis Half Moon, Mandy Campbell, and John Murray, and also our callers. Really appreciate you folks also for joining the conversation, taking the time to call us. And we will be back again tomorrow, taking a look at the future of Native American Studies programs at higher education institutions. I'm Sean Spruce. You've been listening to the one, the only Native America Calling. Enjoy the rest of your day.
The faculty of tribal colleges and universities support their students in countless ways. They say I believe and offer help before it's asked.
Hear that? That's everything tribal college faculty do for their students on Fast Forward. Because if one tried to say it in real time, they'd be here all day. They teach, guide, comfort, and connect. And for that, the community is grateful. Learn more at mostthoroughdjobdescription.com. The American Indian College Fund supports this program.
They give extensions, share progress, share laughter, create calm, and allow reflection. They inspire hope, share wisdom, guide gently, validate healing.
Every family caregiver could use help finding the necessary resources to care for their loved one. The AARP Family Caregiver Resource Guide helps family caregivers access key programs, services, and agencies in their communities. A copy of the guide is available by calling 888-333-5885 or online at aarp.org/caregiver resources. AARP supports this show.
Native America Calling is produced in the Annenberg National Native Voice Studios in Albuquerque, New Mexico by Quantic Broadcast Corporation, a Native nonprofit media organization. Funding is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting with support from the Public Radio Satellite Service. Music is by Brent Michael Davids. Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.